Step away from the gate. The words landed hard, cold as steel. Eleanor Wynne didn't have time to answer. Two security guards were already on her, ripping the badge from her chest, forcing her back like she'd trespassed in her own skin. "You think you belong here?" sneered Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, voice sharp, built to cut. She said nothing, didn't protest, just stood in the dust and sunlight still as stone, a woman who had learned long ago that silence could wound deeper than sound. But then a shift. Her sleeve slipped. Ink surfaced. Not art, not rebellion. A tattoo born of fire and death unit insignia etched with precision only combat knows. Across the lot, Colonel Harper froze mid-step. The coffee in his hand trembled. His eyes locked on her arm, and everything he thought he knew unraveled. She died in 2013, but she never left. Have you ever mistaken someone's silence for absence? She was a whisper among engines, a presence built not by words but by what she chose to remain silent about. They said Eleanor Wynne showed up without history. No social chatter, no online trail, no framed photographs on the walls of her one-bedroom apartment tucked 15 minutes from Clearwater Air Force Base. Just the bare bones of a life, clean lines, sharp corners, silence. She woke each day at 0500 sharp without an alarm. Not out of habit, but out of muscle memory, as if her body had once been trained to rise before danger did. Coffee. Black, bitter, wordless. A quiet ritual held over from another time before names were changed and ranks erased. Her truck, a beat-up silver Ford, was more than transportation. It was a mobile workshop, a bunker, a confessional. The toolbox in the back was arranged with surgical precision as if she were still on a clock that could kill. On the base, Eleanor blended in with the other civilian contractors. Until she didn't. Until someone noticed she never needed to reference blueprints more than once. Until someone realized she memorized systems after a single pass, diagnosed malfunctions by sound, by smell. Until someone asked in a whisper, how does she know things she shouldn't know? She always wore long sleeves even in the July heat and no jewelry, save for an old digital watch scratched and scuffed, still ticking like it remembered everything she'd been through. There was a strength in her silence. Maintenance crews respected her. Some feared her. Others suspected she had once worn a different uniform, one they weren't supposed to ask about. They were right. Hidden in a locked drawer behind a false panel in her apartment sat a uniform folded so precisely it could have passed inspection on any parade ground. Alongside it, a velvet case of ribbons, a photograph of 10 men and 1 woman standing beneath the banner of the 52nd Combat Engineering Unit Steel Wraiths. In the photo, Eleanor smiles. Younger, sharper. The only woman in this group, and the one who stood just off-center like she already knew she wouldn't be there long. And in that still frame there's something undeniable, the look of someone who once defused bombs and never learned how to stop. What do we miss when we look only at what a person shows? Sometimes the quietest rooms echo with the loudest stories. Sometimes the storm begins not with thunder, but with suspicion dressed as protocol. The first whisper came from behind a clipboard. She doesn't belong in restricted zones. It was said in passing, half hidden in routine chatter, but it stuck, like a splinter. Lieutenant Colonel Reese Rodriguez had built his career on certainty of rank, of order, of knowing where people fit. But Eleanor Wynne didn't fit. Not into the chain of command, not into the mold of contractors, not into any category he could box and file. She knew too much, moved like someone who wasn't afraid, and worse, never looked at him the way others did. To a man like Rodriguez, that was enough. He started small extra ID checks, casual questions to base personnel, but the answers frustrated more than clarified. She fixed the backup generators blind. She rerouted the fuel lines in an hour. We'd been stuck on it for days. Honestly, sir, she knows more about our layout than the engineers who built it. That last one kept him up at night. It wasn't just what she knew. It was the way people looked at her, not like a subordinate, but like someone who had already earned their trust in a language they couldn't explain. So, Rodriguez escalated. a formal review of her clearance, a quiet investigation into how she got base access. The results irritated him. Further expedited approvals, high-level sign-offs bypassed protocols. No one would name the approving officer. The trail ended in silence. That made it worse. He pulled security footage, studied her routines, watched her cross restricted zones with confidence. Not sneaking, not hiding, just moving like she belonged. In his world, that was unforgivable. He filed his first complaint with command contractor Eleanor Wynne exhibits behavior inconsistent with civilian protocol. Recommend suspension pending further inquiry. It read like procedure, but it was laced with venom. Others noticed the shift. Security checks became longer, more invasive. Eleanor's badge was scanned 3 times a day. Once they made her take off her boots in the sun. She didn't argue, just stood there, waiting. Calm, quiet. Too quiet, Rodriguez thought. Captain Daniel Harper, Base Intelligence, noticed the commotion from a distance. He'd never spoken more than 5 words to Eleanor, but something about her stuck. Not her presence, but the echo she carried. Like someone who had known violence so closely, it no longer startled her. He began asking his own questions, not with suspicion, but curiosity. The maintenance teams were quick to speak up. She never asks twice. Memorizes everything. She checks spacing in crowded rooms like she's still in formation. She uses radio codes like she was born with a headset on. None of it made sense for a civilian. All of it made too much sense for something else. Harper ran a biometric check just to rule out the impossible. Standard protocol. Name, print, retinal scan. What came back wasn't standard. Match found security classification level 9. Subject deceased. Do not engage without command clearance. The screen flickered. The file required credentials he didn't even know he had. He leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the alert. She wasn't a contractor. She was a ghost. Filed. Forgotten. Officially, gone. But there she was, showing up at 0500, fixing water lines, rewiring power grids, drinking her coffee like it never tasted like ashes. Harper didn't report it, not yet. Not until he understood. Rodriguez, meanwhile, doubled down. He drafted a second complaint, more forceful, more personal. She's hiding something. I can feel it. But what he called instinct was really fear of a woman who never needed to raise her voice to challenge his authority. The base began to shift. Some eyes followed Eleanor with suspicion, others with admiration. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but clouds were forming slow, dark, inevitable. But Rodriguez didn't yet realize. The truth would cost him more than just authority. Sometimes the most dangerous thing to someone who thrives on control is a person who answers to something deeper than fear. And sometimes ghosts don't come to haunt, they come to remind the living of what was once sacred. Every storm has an eye. Hers arrived not with lightning, but with a man trying too hard to feel tall. The morning heat clung to the hangar like a held breath. Metal groaned under the weight of sun and silence. Eleanor was repairing a pressure gauge near Hangar 7, sleeves rolled just high enough to shield the scars, just low enough to keep the whispers at bay. Then came the echo of boots. Rodriguez. And he wasn't alone. 2 MPs flanked him like punctuation marks around a sentence meant to be final. "Miss Wynne," he said loud enough to halt nearby conversations, "we need to talk. Now." She straightened slowly. Not in defiance, not in fear, just a woman setting down a wrench like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "I've had enough of your games," he continued, voice pitched like a man playing to a crowd. "Enough of the secrecy. Enough of the arrogance. We know you're hiding something, and it's time we found out what." Around them, the hum of engines softened. Mechanics, pilots, technicians, they looked up. They lingered. They listened. Eleanor said nothing, just met his stare with a stillness that unnerved him more than any shouted protest could have. Rodriguez stepped closer. Breath, sharp fingers twitching. "You think walking around with a toolbox makes you one of us?" he sneered. You think memorizing blueprints gives you a right to walk our halls like you've earned them." Her hands were calm, but her jaw for just a second tightened like someone remembering a language she swore she'd never speak again. Captain Harper appeared without warning, parting the gathering crowd like fog. Tablet in hand, face pale, eyes hard. "Eleanor," he said gently, but officially, "I need you to roll up your sleeves." Gasps broke out, not from the order, but from the weight it carried. This wasn't a request. This was protocol wrapped in reverence. Eleanor glanced around at the faces that had grown familiar. Mechanics she'd quietly helped. Officers she'd silently corrected. The quiet fraternity of people who work in the shadows so others can fly. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to roll up her right sleeve. The tattoo there was sharp and detailed, a skull entwined with wires and gears, the insignia of the 52nd Combat Engineering Unit Steel Wraiths. Harper swallowed hard. Left arm, too. She obeyed. This one was quieter, more intimate. A line of names etched in ink like gravestones. Dates, coordinates, places that veterans knew without needing to ask. At the bottom, 2 notations: Bronze Star, Purple Heart. And suddenly the hangar wasn't a workspace anymore, it was a sanctuary holding its breath. Harper's voice was thin, measured, but it carried. "Staff Sergeant Eleanor T. Wynne," he read from the screen. 52nd Combat Engineering. Declared KIA, Kandahar Province. 2013. The air collapsed. The noise stopped. Even Rodriguez stumbled back half a step like the words had pushed him. Wynne, for the first time, spoke. Her voice was low and it came from somewhere deeper than lungs. "There were 17 IEDs, she said. I disarmed 16. The tunnel collapsed before I reached the last. A pause. They pulled out, buried the dead. I was still breathing. 3 days. Alone in darkness, digging with fingers until bone cracked. Crawling toward daylight only to find she no longer existed. Command made a choice. Better to let her remain dead. Safer that way for her, for the men she saved. She became a secret with skin. Now here she stood. Resurrected not by her own will, but by a man's arrogance." Rodriguez looked around for support for affirmation, but found none. The weight of what he'd done coiled around his shoulders like chain. "You want to know what I'm hiding?" she said quietly but clearly. "I'm hiding the fact that I died for this country, and lived to serve it again, and with that, every assumption, every judgment, every whisper shattered. And in that silence it became clear this was no longer just about Eleanor. It was about forgotten justice. Sometimes it's not the medals that prove who you are. It's the dirt under your fingernails, and the silence you kept when no one was watching." What would you say to someone who gave everything then, asked for nothing in return? Some choices feel like freedom. Others feel like burial done by your own hand. The hangar emptied slowly like a congregation after an unexpected sermon. No one quite knew what to say, only that something sacred had been revealed, and it demanded quiet. Rodriguez was the first to leave. His footsteps echoed louder than his accusations ever had. No one followed him. Eleanor remained where she stood, arms bare, ink exposed like battle flags folded into skin. Her silence now spoke more loudly than any declaration ever could. Captain Harper stepped closer, tablet still clutched like a confession. "We need to inform command," he said gently. "They'll want to reinstate you, your rank, your record, everything." Eleanor didn't move. She only looked toward the sunlit opening of the hangar where the wind touched her face like an old friend. "They already held my memorial," she said softly. "A folded flag, 21 guns, my name on the wall." Harper hesitated. "They got it wrong. You came back." "No." Her eyes stayed distant. "I crawled out." "There's a difference." He didn't argue. She sat down on a crate, arms resting on her knees, gaze lost in the past. "They offered me a new identity," she said. "Told me I could never wear the uniform again, that it would be safer for everyone if I stayed dead." "Why did you agree?" She looked up. Not angry, not bitter, just tired, because the Taliban was hunting names, not bodies. My unit was still active. They'd seen what I'd done. Put a price on my face. Staying dead kept my men alive. Her voice cracked slightly like a door opening in a long-sealed room. They called it honorable exile. Said I'd done enough. But no one tells you what it feels like. To have no flag, no past, no name that anyone can say aloud. Harper sat beside her. Not as an officer, just as a man trying to understand a language few ever spoke. "I read your file," he said. "You saved over 200 lives that day." "I remember every face I didn't save," she whispered. Twilight bled across the floor of the hangar. Dust drifted through golden light. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle called retreat. Later that evening, the base commander, Colonel Emerson Hayes, summoned her to his office. Older than Rodriguez, quieter, a man who'd seen the difference between decoration and dignity. "I remember your name," he said, voice steady. "You were spoken of in briefings, as a myth. We buried you a hero. We owe you more than silence." "I don't need a ceremony," Eleanor said before he could finish. He blinked. "We want to restore your record, your identity, honor you. The media would—" "No media," she said more firmly now. "No medals, no flag to unfold. Dead soldiers don't need parades." Hayes sat back, breath caught in his throat. "But you're not dead." "I am," she said, not as metaphor, as fact. "I died in that tunnel. The Eleanor you remember, she never came out. What you see now is a promise that kept walking." There was nothing dramatic in her tone, just a stillness so complete it made the fluorescent lights buzz louder than usual. "I want one thing," she said finally. "Let me keep fixing things. Let me work in peace, and make sure Rodriguez never comes near me again." Hayes gave a slow, solemn nod. The kind a man gives when he realizes he's speaking not to a subordinate, but to someone who outranks him in ways no badge can measure. Some returns are not comebacks, they're consequences. And some heroes don't want redemption. Only distance from the ruins they were pulled from. What would you choose to be remembered or to protect the ones who still breathe? Because you disappeared. Not all healing comes with light. Some arrive like dusk, slowly, softly, without permission. Rodriguez was gone by week's end. No ceremony, no farewell, just a sealed envelope and a transfer order to a desk job in a forgotten corner of the system where no decisions mattered and no one asked him to lead again. His office window faced a parking lot. From there, he could just make out the silhouette of Eleanor Wynne standing beneath a tower crane, issuing quiet instructions to a crew working on an infrastructure overhaul. She never looked his way, but something in her posture upright steady told him she didn't need to. Back on base, her name was still Miss Wynne on every roster. But things had changed. People didn't speak to her more, they noticed her more. Crews who once called her the quiet one now deferred to her instinctively. Security waved her through without question. Junior officers began using terms they picked up from watching her check spacing. Secure the access point, verify before touch. They didn't know she had once said those words under mortar fire. But they used them just the same. It wasn't reverence. It was respect, grown in silence, the kind that doesn't need explanation. One morning, she volunteered for foundation repairs near the memorial wall. The old structure was crumbling, sun-worn, rain-streaked, forgotten by those who hadn't read every name. Eleanor worked at dawn, alone, pouring concrete like prayer, smoothing edges like memory. That's when she found it. Buried beneath weathered bricks, half swallowed by time, a tarnished brass plaque. Her own name. Staff Sergeant Eleanor Wynne, KIA, Kandahar, 2013. She stared at it for a long while. The sky behind her began to shift orange, bleeding into blue. She crouched down, fingertips tracing each letter like a woman reading her own eulogy. No music played. No camera watched. Only the sound of a trowel against stone, and the soft hitch of breath that comes when mourning meets acceptance. She didn't remove the plaque, didn't clean it, just reinforced the foundation beneath it, packed earth tighter, rebuilt the footing, made sure the wall wouldn't fall. That morning, a group of young airmen jogged past during their training run. As they neared the wall, they slowed, formed a straight line, raised hands in salute to the names carved in metal. Eleanor stood 20 feet away, dirt on her jeans, hair pulled back, face smudged with dust. She paused, turned toward the wall, and stood at attention. No one noticed. But it didn't matter. Her body remembered the rhythm. Her heart remembered the names. And for one breathless moment, the living honored the dead, while the dead honored the living. Later that week, a change began to ripple through Clearwater. Security protocols were reviewed, not relaxed, but humanized. Contractors were briefed differently, with clarity, with dignity. The phrase, "Don't be another Rodriguez," began to circulate quietly, not as mockery, as reminder. And Eleanor, she continued her work. Blueprints were routed through her desk first. She was asked to consult on water filtration, electrical rerouting, and storm barrier upgrades. Her pay increased. Her title didn't. That, too, was intentional. She didn't want rank. She wanted usefulness. Her apartment remained sparse, the drawer with the uniform still locked. But at night, when the wind blew west and the lights of the base flickered beneath the stars, she would sometimes stand at her window, mug in hand, and whisper names no one else remembered anymore. Not as ghosts, but as brothers. Some transformations don't ask for applause. They simply ask for space to keep showing up, to keep repairing, to keep remembering. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay, not to be seen, but to ensure others are never forgotten. Some legacies are carved in marble. Others are built one quiet repair at a time. 6 months passed like pages in a book no one ever meant to write. Eleanor Wynne remained at Clearwater not because she had to, but because something in her still answered the call. Not the bugle or the flag, but the quiet hum of things that needed fixing. She never spoke of what happened in the hangar, never brought up the name Rodriguez, never asked for anything more than work orders and wiring schematics. But others remembered. The base became gentler, more watchful. Security officers now paused before questioning. Contractors were offered chairs, not suspicion. And when someone new arrived, the old ones told the story carefully without names. There was once someone here who served in silence. Let's make sure we see people now, before it's too late. Eleanor, as always, did her part. Her contractor checks were split discreetly, half deposited, half sent through anonymous channels. Some landed in the hands of a widow in Kansas. Others filled the final tuition payment for a soldier's daughter. Medical bills, mortgage gaps, holiday groceries. All vanished quietly like frost under sun. No one knew who the benefactor was, but many suspected, and no one dared ask. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the ridgelines, Eleanor packed her toolbox with a kind of reverence, wiping each handle, clicking each latch shut. Nearby, the flag lowered with its usual grace. She turned toward it just for a moment, removed her cap, stood still, not as a symbol, but as a vow. In the silence between duty and dusk, a breeze moved through the hangar. Some swore they heard names on the wind. Others simply felt a little braver that day. If you've ever known someone who gave quietly, who repaired more than just machines, let them know they're not invisible. And if you've ever felt unseen yourself, perhaps this is your reminder. Your light matters. Share this story if it brought someone to mind, because sometimes the simplest lives leave the deepest marks.